Ancient Greece, a land shrouded in mystery, one of the most ancient civilizations. Dorothy Mills once said, "The Greeks were the first great thinkers in the world. They were possessed of a passion for knowing the truth about all things in heaven and earth." A very apt and precise definition of the great people of ancient Greece, who left such great gifts for us, such as their philosophical breakthroughs, the Greek ideal values of beauty, freedom, and truth, and its beautiful art. This is the story of ancient Greece. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Tim, and we are on our fourth installment talking about ancient Greece. And today we are talking about the Greek colonies, because the Greeks were a very adventurous people who loved the sea. And so they would often travel to lots of islands, and one day they came to the realization that not only could they travel and explore these islands, but they can colonize and settle these islands for themselves. And in terms of the Greek motive behind this, there was a variety of motives depending on where they came from on the mainland. Some hated the government that they came from, and so they wanted to escape that. Other places were just so overcrowded that they just wanted to leave and be in a more spacious area. And then others saw the potential of wealth in terms of resources that they could find on their newly settled territory. But of course, before they did all this, they consulted the oracle at Delphi to make sure that it was a success. And the best, or what is considered the best to be of the Greek colonies, is Ionia. The historian Herodotus spoke about how Ionia was the best because of its optimal climate and season. So it's just the perfect place. And it was close to Asia Minor. And they had a empire very close to them called the Lydian Empire. And at first, the Lydian Empire was very friendly and neighborly towards them, but then the Lydian king thought otherwise eventually and became full of ambition and decided that he wanted to conquer Ionia and its colonies. And so then they started to attack the city of Miletus, and this caused an 11-year war. And the reason that it was 11 years long on just this one city was because since Miletus was surrounded by water from the Greek mainland or from wherever else, they could get unlimited supplies. So there was really no way to cut off the resources of Miletus, which made them last essentially forever, which made the Lydian king give up his idea of conquest and make peace. Especially because there is a much bigger threat rising in the east in Persia with the Median people, and so then a battle between the Lydians and the Medians took place, a great war. But this was very short lived because during their fight, it was daytime, and then it all of a sudden became dark. They were experiencing a lunar eclipse, and of course, at that time, they would not realize it was such. And so then they decided that, we need to make peace because this is obviously, some supernatural stuff going on. And so then they made peace, and then there was no problem there. The first king of Lydia dies, and then another king of Lydia named Croesus comes up, and he decides that he's going to try once more to conquer Ionia, and he's actually very successful at it. But he's also very benevolent, though he's ambitious, a very benevolent guy who essentially the Ionian colonies are now under his rule, but he tells them that they can do their own thing and continue to, you know, live as they live. And so there's really no friction between the Lydians and the Ionians because the Lydians essentially left the Ionians alone, even though they were technically under their rule. Meanwhile, another guy shows up in Media named Cyrus the Great, and he's the king of Persia. And so then Croesus from Lydia is very worried about this because Cyrus is a very ambitious man. And so then he goes to speak to the oracle at Delphi, and the oracle at Delphi essentially tells him that if he crosses the river Hales, then a great empire will be destroyed. And to the mind of Croesus, he thought that, well, the Persian Empire will be destroyed if I cross that river. Now we shall see if that turns out to be true. And so what happens next is that the Lydians declare war on the king of Persia. And so then a great battle is going to take place. The armies of Persia are marching and the armies of Lydia are marching. And one thing that is super essential to the armies of Lydia are horses. This is like their, it's like horses are the kryptonite to any army that they face. They are very well with horses. It's always their key to victory. But Cyrus has a solution to that, and that is the camel. It is said that horses can't stand the sight or the smell of a camel, and so the camels in Cyrus's army were all in the back carrying baggage. And so then Cyrus basically brings them to the front of the army. And so then when the Lydians charge to attack them, the horses by default are driven away by simply seeing them or smelling them. And so then the horses are proven useless, and then the Lydians are conquered, and now Persia has the upper hand. But Cyrus is very curious, and he's asking why Croesus even, started this war in the first place, because they were allies at one point. And Croesus explains the oracle at Delphi and how he must have been deceived by that, and so that is why they're in the situation they are now. And so then Cyrus takes Lydia, and then he also takes the Greek city states of Ionia, and then he establishes tyrants to rule the Ionian cities. And then the conditions get worse, and any Greek who was trying to flee a bad government from the mainland just came into a situation that is likely a lot worse. And so now Cyrus dies, and then we have the man, King Darius. And Darius, like all these people we seem to be talking about, is a man of ambition, and his first goal is to take the land of Scythia or Scythia. And this is a land that's north of the Black Sea. And so then what he does is that he takes the Greeks that he just conquered from Ionia and then puts them to work on the ships, because the Persians aren't a seafaring people, but the Greeks are the experts. So he puts his newly conquered people to work and essentially builds like this land bridge of boats to the land of Scythia. And then Darius begins to try to conquest and take it over. But it's actually very tricky because the Scythians are very crafty, and they practically avoided him. And then it got to a point where the, what do you call it? The Scythians basically made it back to the land bridge where all the Ionian Greeks were waiting. And then they said, "Hey, you can just like move all these boats and then collapse the land bridge, and then Darius is going to be stuck here, and then we'll just take care of him from there." But the the uh, the Ionian Greeks aren't down with this, because they know that conditions for them will just worsen with the rule of the tyrants. And so they try to appease the Scythians by moving a few of the boats, and the Scythians are like, okay, they're doing their job. And then they go away, but then they don't move them enough, and then Darius is still able to make it back to land. And the reason that Darius went back to Persia in the first place and stopped to conquer them was he received a mysterious omen. He received a frog, a mouse, and a bird, and 5 arrows. And someone interpreted this mysterious omen to him as this, as saying that unless you become birds and fly up to heaven, or become mice and seek down under the earth, or become frogs and jump into the pond, then you shall not basically return alive, but you shall be smitten by these arrows. And so then Darius took that very seriously, and then just went out of there all the way back to Persia, and the Scythians were left alone. Now, while he was away, some interesting things are going on with the city of Miletus, which we talked about in the beginning of this video. So, in the city of Miletus, the main tyrant is with Darius in Scythia at the moment, and so then a relative of the tyrant is taking over. And since Darius is not in town, the Ionian Greeks believe that now is a great time to start a rebellion. And so this relative of the tyrant is very much desirous to please King Darius, and so he's ready to shut it down. But then it appears to be a losing game for the Persians, and so then he joins the Greeks in their rebellion and starts fighting other Persians. So a very quick change of motives. But the people, Miletus, know that they cannot handle the Persians all by themselves, and so they need help. So then they send for help from Sparta, and Sparta says no. Athens says yes and sends 20 ships to the direction of Miletus. And then there's a close by Greek colony called Eretrius, and they give them 5 ships because at one point Miletus helped them. So it's their way of saying thank you. You helped us, now we will help you. And then they took, and so Greek aid is coming. They take the island of Sardis, but that is as far as they got because a great fire starts in Miletus from one house, and then there's chaos ensuing, and then this gives the Persians time to regroup, and then they're able to drive out the Greek attackers. Now, Darius comes back from his trip in Scythia, and he's very angry at what has gone on, and he wants vengeance on the Athenians. But first, he must deal with the main problem with these Ionian guys. And so he burns Miletus to the ground, and then he sends the women and children off to be slaves in an ancient Iranian city. And so then he is, and then the men of the city are then consigned to hard, torturous labor for the rest of their lives. And now that Ionia has been dealt with, Darius's eyes are now on the city of Athens, and he is out for revenge. That concludes our 4th installment of our series on ancient Greece. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe so that when our 5th installment of this series drops, then you'll be able to catch that as soon as possible to see what happens with Darius seeking vengeance on Athens. Thank you.